Invasions have had a remarkable impact on the global economy. The calculations have often been in the hundreds of millions of dollars of impact on an annual basis. And those impacts have been on food resources, recreational resources, public health issues. And in terms of our predictive ability to understand where invasions occur, when they occur, what the next species will be. This is a very challenging sort of part of the science of invasion biology. And the Risk Release Project focuses on our understanding of the relationship between how many individuals of a given species may be released in a novel environment and how that relates to their potential success to establish a viable population.
This is the Great Chips Initiative land-based testing facility. It was constructed for us to be able to tell whether a treatment process that claims to be able to meet certain discharge standards actually does, and to scope out what's the next step that needs to be taken to help protect the Great Lakes from further ship-mediated introductions of invasive species. The risk release study that the Great Lakes Protection Fund has funded allows us to understand how the risk of invasion relates to different amounts of discharge of live organisms.
So the Risk Release Project includes experiments and surveys. And the experiments are the mesocosm part of the study, where particular individual species are grown in big containers under controlled environmental variables to test the impact of those variables on population growth. And the survey component is collecting field samples to look for invaders in both the harbor waters and in ship waters. And one of the roles that this project can play is to work out the best template for future research. And once that's been demonstrated, then it can essentially be applied for any species anywhere by anyone.
The risk release experiment is a very simple experiment. Essentially what we do is we take a lake and move it indoors into a controlled environment. And then we bring in an experimental invader. We add those invaders at different concentrations. And then we watch them for a period of 8 weeks, and we take a look at their growth and survivorship. So we selected an asexual producer, the spiny water flea. The spiny water flea has a very long tail spine on it that serves as a fossil record for us. So after 8 weeks, those spines will be present there for us to help determine what happens. At the end of last season, we developed our first control where we were able to document both the growth and reproduction in those tanks. So that gave us our first good feeling that we do have an adequate method. And the best case scenario is to come out with a scientific tool that will allow other researchers to start looking at a whole suite of other organisms. That's where we need to go with this down the road to really get an understanding of what really allows an unwanted animal to come in and survive and grow.
So that's very useful in terms of an artificial arrangement under controlled conditions, but you want to know how much does it relate to the real world. And so at the same time, we need to be surveying ship discharges and the receiving actual harbor and looking at rates of possible establishment of new populations of things in order to ground truth our faster but more artificial Mesocosm experiment. So Duluth Harbor is a perfect venue for this kind of research that we're doing because it is representative of a place where there is a lot of ballast dropped. So we've selected a target organism called the bloody red shrimp. It has already invaded certain harbors of the Great Lakes, but has never been detected in Duluth Superior Harbor. So that organism offers us an opportunity to determine the relationship between drop-off pressure and establishment over time. We're making a methods template that can be replicated, and with enough partners in generating this information, we will be able to match the Mesocosm results with the field survey results. But we're going to need partners to make this thing produce the best information for the Great Lakes.
The Great Lakes shipping interests want to be part of the solution, and we recognize that ballast water mediated invasives are a major problem on the Great Lakes. And right now, the international and the U.S. federal and state standards for the degree of treatment that would be required of the ballast water are set on best guesses of what would be effective. What is not fully known is, species by species, how many of these critters are needed to be able to establish a new population in a new area. And that's what the risk release effort is hoping to identify. It's virtually impossible to get to zero, to clean the water to the point that it has nothing living in it. How do you treat a ship like this with 15 million gallons or more of water that was pumped out of a harbor somewhere? So the effort that Great Ships is embarking on here is to determine at what point have you provided safety that you will not be introducing a new species to an area that they're not currently populated. And that is a huge accomplishment that the Great Ships Initiative can be very proud of.
The EPA is a science-based organization, so we want to make sure we're relying on the best available science. And in particular, we're looking at ballast water as being one of the primary vectors for invasive species introductions. So what the risk release program that the Northeast Midwest Institute is doing will inform the scientific understanding of how much of an organism can be released before it hits that tipping point where it becomes established. So this work is important for creating the right mechanisms for making sure that those discharges are below those levels. The EPA and the Coast Guard and others can develop control strategies to prevent those introductions from taking place.
Today, the Great Lakes have over 180 invaders that have set up permanent homes here. They have fundamentally altered how energy, material, and biota move through the system. It's a top-tier challenge to not only manage what we have, but to stop the next ones. And the team working on the risk release project is asking the question for the first time, what do the lakes need, as opposed to what can the technology do? It's changing the conversation about invasive species, not only in the Great Lakes, but worldwide. The Great Lakes Protection Fund and members of the risk release team were pioneers in creating the technologies that drove the international conventions, that have driven EPA requirements. And this is the logical next step, is to begin to ask the question, how clean does it really have to be to protect the Great Lakes? And so this is an evolution from, can we get technology to remove big risks, to can we set performance criteria that adequately protect us from all risks?
The reality is that invasions haven't stopped arriving. And as shipping routes change, as climate changes, the number of species and the identity of those species that's coming into Great Lakes ports is continually changing. So the potential for new invaders is always there. And in that sense, it's never too late to start working on preventing the invasions of the future.
So this research helps us to know what the threat is under a range of conditions. And the more that we understand that, the more we, in a sense, know our enemy. And the better we will be at setting that bright line of prevention where we want it to be.
Northeast Midwest Institute was founded at the request of Congress. Congress needed a trusted source of nonpartisan research and information to bring to bear on the policy process. And the Great Ships Initiative that shows what we can do to have impact on policy and have impact on navigation and the environment, the economy. We've found that research can be the great bridge builder between opposing parties quite often, not only political parties, but different interests, because when knowledge comes to bear, it can be the great unifier because people see a path forward. And that's what sets us apart, that we produce this trusted research and we have an open relationship on Capitol Hill and with the administration where we can bring it to them. But we need to constantly stay on our toes and be moving into the future, ready to meet the next threat and looking to what the next challenge is facing the environment and the economy of the Great Lakes.